Okay, so welcome to part 3 of this series called Leave the Church Behind. If you have not seen part 1 and part 2, please make sure you go and listen to those first so that you can see how we built up to the point that we're going to be at today. We're just talking about all of the pagan things that go on in the church, and it's a lot of them. We're going to talk about how following God's laws would actually make our community completely better than what it is now under the current leadership of today's church, as well as who all this information is really for, because it's not for everybody. Now, let's jump straight in and let's get started with one item that most of you guys look at dearly or hold dearly in your hearts. However, it is the most pagan thing that you don't even know about within the church. What I'm talking about is the cross. Yes, that cross that you have, probably hanging around your neck, that you probably have hanging up in your house somewhere, that's all over the churches. Yes, that cross is actually something that's pagan. And yeah, right now I'm coming swinging hard out the gate. I know a lot of you guys are probably in an uproar right now on how could he say that and how could it be this, all that stuff. If you think about it, really, Christ was killed on the cross. I mean, if you had a family member that was killed and they were shot by a gun, would you wear a gun around your neck? Would you have pictures of guns hanging up in your house? I don't really think you would want to do that. So just looking at it from that standpoint, it's like, why would you do that anyway? Why would you want to idolize this symbol of something that somebody that you care about died on? But that's not even the point. That symbol is actually a pagan symbol, and you have to think about this as well. Christ was crucified by the Romans. The Romans did not follow the Bible or God. They had a bunch of pagan things and deities that they worshiped that had nothing to do with God. And these are the people that crucified Christ, and they are the ones that used the cross in order to do so, even though it's even arguable if he was hung on a cross or not. Because in the Bible, it does say he was hung on a tree. When you go into some history of them using what they would call the cross to hang people, because, he wasn't the first person to be put on the cross, you see things that resemble like a wooden stake or something else close to that. So this was not a Christian symbol. This was something that came from a pagan group of people. But most notably would be the fact that this was a representation of another deity, another god. Now let's take a look in the Bible and see if I'm tripping. Let's go to Ezekiel 8:13 and 14 in the NLT. Then the Lord added, "Come, and I will show you even more detestable sins than these." So he already showed some detestable sins, and now he's about to show even more detestable sins, right? Now let's see what they're doing in Israel that's more detestable than what was just shown. He says, "He brought me to the north gate of the Lord's temple, and some women were sitting there weeping for the god Tammuz." Now, we're in Israel here, and they are weeping for another god, and the god's name is Tammuz. That is where that cross, the T-shaped object that we all call the cross, this is where that came from. So let's take a look at this right here. So even the Philadelphia Church of God, they did some research on this as well. The cross, pagan symbol or symbol of faith. And let's take a look at what it says. First, are you sure that Christ died on a cross? History and more recent archaeology show that the cross was used as a religious symbol centuries before Christ. The shape of the two-beam cross has its origin in ancient Chaldea and was used to represent the god Tammuz. So we see here in the Bible, in Ezekiel, God was showing Ezekiel that there were women weeping for a whole nother god, Tammuz. And the god Tammuz, the representation of him was that T shape called the cross. And this was around way before Christ even died. But let's continue. Tammuz is the deified Nimrod, the first man to lead the opposition against God after the Great Flood. He founded the city of Babylon, and along with his mother, wife, Semiramis, founded the pagan Babylon mystery religion, the origin of all false religion today, they say. It says the Egyptians used crosses in abundance, as did the Hindus, all people that did not believe in God. The British Museum, for example, exhibits statues of ancient Assyrian kings wearing almost perfect Maltese crosses around their necks. Again, this was a pagan symbol from the past, and they used this pagan symbol to crucify Christ. according to our understanding. Now, listen to this part. The widespread use of the cross did not begin until the time of Constantine. He's another figure that did a whole lot of messing up and polluting of the Bible and the whole belief system that we have. Now, this was 3 centuries after Christ. Archaeologists have not found any Christian use of the symbol before that time. According to one W.E. Vine, the cross as a Christian quote unquote symbol was taken directly from the pagans. So it's a fact that this came from pagans, that this is a pagan symbol that honors other gods, and the church is still allowing this to go on, and they have them up all over the place in every church. You're wearing this pagan symbol. You probably got your children wearing this pagan symbol, and nobody feels any type of way about it. A lot of people don't even know this. If the church knows so much about what was going on and what Christ was doing, they should understand this as well, and they should be telling you to do different than having it out all over the place, wearing it, and they shouldn't have it up in their church. At least this church who did this research is trying to get to the root of the truth. Now let's take a look at something else from a Jehovah Witness website. It says the shape of the two-beam cross had its origin in ancient Chaldea and was used as the symbol of the god Tammuz, being in the shape of a mystic Taw, the initial of his name. In that country and in the adjacent lands, including Egypt, by the middle 3rd century AD, the churches had either departed from or had travestied certain doctrines of the Christian faith. And again, this was not Christian. They did not call themselves Christian back then. This is just talking about the faith of following the Bible. But it says here that by this time, the churches had departed from or travestied the doctrines of the faith. In order to increase the prestige of the apostate ecclesiastical system, pagans were received into the churches apart from the regeneration by faith. So they weren't received because they changed faith, and were permitted largely to retain their pagan signs and symbols. So just for the sake of making following the Bible more appealing, they allowed a whole bunch of pagan people to come in, whether they actually believed in the Bible or not, and allowed them to keep their pagan signs and bring them into the church, muddying the waters of what we should and should not be doing while following this Bible that God gave us and told us exactly what we should and should not do. And honoring other gods is not something that we should do. Now let's talk about Sunday service and the pagan origins of it. So the Israelites in the Bible did not follow a Sunday service. You really have to go and look at how the calendars have changed over time, and you can see that we haven't always had this calendar that we use in play over time. As a matter of fact, the Israelites went by a lunar calendar. We go by a solar calendar. In the Bible, it describes how they would wait for the new moon to signify a new month. And on that new month, they would start counting the days. Once the 7th day came from that point, then it was a Sabbath. They followed a Sabbath, not a Sunday service. But your boy Constantine is the one that made Sunday service an official thing. And also, you also have to look at the fact that he was a Roman. The Romans honored other gods. When they created their calendars, each day was to honor a different god. Sunday was for their sun god. And the Romans had the Israelites subject to them, and they didn't really like them that much either. But your boy Constantine is the one that implemented Sunday service. Let's look here. On March 7, 321 AD, Sunday, which was sacred to Christians, it was not sacred to Christians because, for one, they didn't call themselves Christians. 2, we're talking about believers in the Bible and God of the Bible. 3, I just explained to you how they did a Sabbath that was based off of a lunar calendar. So again, just wanted to correct this here that it was not sacred to Christians. But Constantine had adopted the Bible at this point. So it's really more so trying to talk about those Romans that were following that at the time. But anyway, what it's really saying here is that it's sacred to the Roman sun god Sol Invictus. This is the part you want to pay attention to. And it was declared an official day of rest. On that day, markets were banned and public offices were closed. So on the Sabbath day, what you're supposed to do is rest. You're supposed to not do any work. You're supposed to stay at home unless you're going out, to the temple or to learn or to preach the word of God. But you're not supposed to do any buying or selling on that day. So you can see here that Constantine, he declared Sunday to be the official day of worship, the official day of rest. He closed markets so there will be no buying and selling, and closed some offices for work. So he's taking some elements of what the Sabbath entails and mixing that up with Sunday service, which was there to keep sacred for the sun god Sol Invictus that he also worshipped, or that he really worshipped, I should say. So now we're getting the muddying of the waters. Now we have some parts of what God said to do mixed with some other pagan elements that these believers and pagan gods wanted to still follow and practice. And we're mixing the two things together now, and now you're muddying the waters. And this happened all the way 321 AD. So you can imagine how that glue is going to stick over time when people don't even realize that this is the point when that happened. And now it seems like Sunday service is just a normal thing to do. Like people have always done this, but people that actually follow God, believers in God, not believers in God and other gods, they did a Sabbath and not Sunday service, because Sunday service is in honor of a whole nother God. But hey, don't listen to me. Let's look at a little bit more information here. Now it says, indicative of Rome's pluralism, Constantine continued worshiping Sol Invictus even after he converted to Christianity. It was not until 323 AD, more than a decade after he received word from God, that he publicly renounced the unconquered son, Sol Invictus, in favor of the crucified son. And I really don't believe he might have did that for a public show of whatever, but I'm more than sure that he still believed in the sun God and still served him. Basically, he received the word from God around 313 AD when he was, I guess, coincidentally trying to conquer more lands and expand the reach of his empire. He suddenly said that he got a sign from God. He saw a cross in the sky or something like that, a cross, a pagan symbol that doesn't come from God. He saw that in the sky, and he said that it was God sending him a sign that he should become, as they always going to say, Christian, or basically a follower of God. And then he proceeded to say that he's going to conquer and expand his empire in the name of God. So going out and kill people to expand his empire in the name of God is what he got from that message. And he was successful in expanding his empire, and he continued to claim the Bible and God. But it took him 10 years after that to publicly renounce the sun god. And that happened a little bit after he initiated making Sunday service a thing to honor the sun god, making it the new day of rest in lieu of the Sabbath that God said you're supposed to do. Okay, and some of y'all might still be thinking, no, we don't have to do the Sabbath no more. That was then, this is now. Things have changed. Well, I would like to hear or see somebody show me where God all of a sudden said that, oh, no, you don't have to do that anymore. He never said that. As a matter of fact, he said that this is a permanent thing that will never change. But y'all let your boy Constantine tell y'all to do something different, and you continue to hold on to what he said versus what God said. But let me show you what God said. Right here in Exodus 31 and 13 in the KJV, speak thou also unto the children of Israel, saying, verily my Sabbaths ye shall keep, for it is a sign between me and you throughout your generations, that ye may know that I am the Lord that doth sanctify you. Ye shall keep the Sabbath therefore, for it is holy unto you. Everyone that defileth it shall surely be put to death. For whosoever doeth any work therein, that soul shall be cut off from among his people. 6 days may work be done, but in the seventh is the Sabbath of rest, holy to the Lord. Whosoever doeth any work in a Sabbath day, he shall surely be put to death. He said that twice. Sounds pretty serious to me. The children of Israel shall keep the Sabbath, to observe the Sabbath throughout their generations, for a perpetual covenant. Now, the last time I checked, perpetual is something that's never ending. So how Constantine can come in and say, oh no, we're going to do Sunday service on our calendar that we made, I don't think that he has the authority while still worshiping a sun god at the same time. Especially, I don't think he has the authority, nor you should listen to somebody like that, especially when God said the Sabbath is what is holy to us and holy to him, and that is a perpetual covenant throughout our generations. That does not end. And let me finish this real quick. It is a sign between me and the children of Israel forever, it says. For in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, and on the seventh day he rested and was refreshed. And look, you can't just say you're doing the Sabbath on whatever day you want to, just saying, oh, Sunday is my Sabbath day. That's the day that no, God said you do it on a specific day. You have to do it on the day that he said do it. You can't make up your own day. And you definitely should not be going off of the day that Constantine told you to do it, because he served a sun god on Sunday. Sunday was put on the calendar because of the sun god. So you don't do what Constantine says, you do what God says. And you can't do what you want to do on the Sabbath day. If you are cooking on the Sabbath day, you're not supposed to do that. If you're buying things, selling things, conducting business, working on the Sabbath day, that's things that you're not supposed to be doing on the Sabbath day. You can't just do what you want on the Sabbath day. You have to be trying to fulfill what God told you to do to the best of your ability. Of course, if you have to go to work or you gonna get fired for going to work, of course, that's something that has to be considered. But you not having to do something like that on the Sabbath day and doing it anyway, that is you willfully sinning. You not even trying to figure out what day the Sabbath is or trying to keep or not trying to keep any form of the Sabbath is you willfully sinning. Again, we have to do what God said do, not what makes us comfortable, and not what everybody else is doing just because everybody else is doing it and you don't want to feel like a black sheep. That doesn't matter. Now let's talk about something less controversial that is also pagan and celebrated and pushed heavily in the church. Of course, I'm talking about Christmas. The least controversial thing out of all of these things. And I already know what most of you guys are thinking or how you choose to operate because I've seen the knowledge of that being pagan being pushed more recently over the last few years. And I've seen just as many people not care at all and still do it anyway. And the justification is, oh, it's for the children. You know, we need to make sure the children are happy, give them something. Oh, this is, the one of the few times that our family is able to get together and actually do something. Man, there are other days you can give your children gifts. There are other days you can celebrate your children. There are other events and times that you can get together with your family. There is no reason that you absolutely have to celebrate this day, that you absolutely have to do this for your children. There is no real excuse for that. It's really just an excuse because you know that it doesn't matter if you see the facts that it's pagan, if you see the facts that it's this and that, you still gonna do it anyway. So you just gonna come up with any excuse to write off any facts that show you that this is against God. But for those of you that actually care about what God thinks, let's go ahead and dive in while the other people are cursing me out right now for what I just said. And we're gonna go into the Bible and we're gonna go into some facts about Christmas outside the Bible. So let's start with the famous verse that shuts this holiday down, where it's specifically talking about this holiday in the Bible. And that's Jeremiah 10:1 in the KJV. And it reads, "Hear ye the word which the Lord speaketh unto you, O house of Israel. Thus saith the Lord, learn not the way of the heathen, and be not dismayed at the signs of heaven, for the heathen are dismayed at heaven. For the heathen are dismayed at them." So before he even tells us what he's talking about, he's letting us know not to be dismayed by the signs of heaven and not to follow what heathens do, because heathens are dismayed by the signs of heaven. They're impressed by the signs of heaven, the stars, the sun, astrology. And some of you guys that follow those different belief systems, those different influencers out there, they tell you that, oh, billionaires pay attention to the stars and the sun and all that stuff, and that this is in the Bible just to keep you from wanting to do things that can help prosper you. Well, I see here a message coming from God saying that this is what we're not supposed to do. That's really enough for me. But I've also seen people see great success without paying attention to any of that stuff, just relying on the strength of God. Now, let's take a look at where this holiday comes from and how it's connected to astrology in being dismayed by the heavens or impressed by the heavens. Because the winter solstice is the reversal of the sun's apparent ebbing in the sky, in ancient times, it was seen as the symbolic death and rebirth of the sun or of a sun god. So imagine that they look at it as the death and resurrection of the sun. In cultures which use cyclic calendars based on the winter solstice, the year as reborn was celebrated with reference to the life, death, rebirth deities or new beginnings and reversal. So they used the winter solstice. That was when they would celebrate what we would call Christmas today. But they were looking at the heavens, the stars, the sun, the moon, and all that stuff to determine when the winter solstice came around. And for them, it had a connection with the life, death, and rebirth of deities. That's why it was important to them. So trying to do something at that specific time frame is connected to worship of other gods. Now let's take a look at this actual sun god that we keep hearing from Constantine in the Roman Empire and what all that's about. So we can see here Sol Invictus, which is the name of that sun god that they followed, on the other hand, was believed to be a Syrian sun god whose cult was first promoted in Rome under Elagabalus, if that's correct, without success. Some 50 years later, in AD 274, Aurelian established the cult of Sol Invictus as an official religion. So it didn't work at first, but eventually they set the cult up as a religion, and Constantine was following it. He was a part of it. And it was a thing in Rome. But let's look a little bit further at this holiday and its timing, and further look at the connection with their sun god. In the ancient Roman calendar, December 25th was the date of the winter solstice. So the winter solstice was on December 25th. In AD 274, the emperor Aurelian made this date of the festival Dies Natalis Solis Invicti, the birthday of Sol Invictus, or the invincible sun. Gary Forsyth, professor of ancient history, says this celebration would have formed a welcome addition to the 7-day period of Saturnalia, which is December 17th through the 23rd, Rome's most joyous holiday season since Republic times, characterized by parties, banquets, and exchanges of gifts. Oh, exchanges of gifts, banquets, parties. This sounds just like Christmas. And of course, at the same time, in December 25th is Sol Invictus's birthday. That's very interesting, but let's keep reading. A widely held theory is that the church chose December 25th as Christ's birthday to appropriate the Roman winter solstice festival marking the sun god's birthday. So we already read how they allowed pagan people into the church and allowed them to keep their pagan symbols. And in Rome, they are, part of this religious cult that celebrates the sun god Sol Invictus, and Sol Invictus's birthday is supposed to be December 25th. And the winter solstice is around that time, aligning with the death and rebirth of the sun. But for them, their sun god, which is why that time frame is so important to do this celebration at that time frame on that date. But they are allowing these pagan things into the church, and now they're taking their sun god's birthday and just saying, oh, let's just say that's Christ's birthday. So that then the pagan people can accept it, their worship Sol Invictus, and the biblical people can accept it. So now again, we have that muddying of waters, the blurring of lines between what is the truth and what God said and what is a lie. And we're connecting the things together and then letting that sit over time to where we get to today and we think it's all gravy, it's all sweet. But we see that they are lying, telling us that this is Christ's birthday in the church, and they know that he doesn't even have a birthday in the Bible. Israelites and people that followed the Bible back in those days did not even celebrate birthdays. Birthdays are a pagan thing that came from other places, from deity worship and other negative things. Christ, the Israelites, the disciples, none of them celebrated birthdays. There's no record of Christ's birthday. So how is it that we allow them to keep lying to it? The church tells you you're not supposed to lie, but they're lying to you and tell you lies about this being Christ's birthday. Now, I've seen some churches come out and say, okay, it's not his birthday, but we still gonna celebrate Christmas. The whole reason that Christmas is celebrated on this day is to honor a sun god and to honor the death and rebirth of deities. If you are making this celebration happen at this time, on this date, you are doing the same ritual that they did for their God. It's not hard to see. We have the facts right here in front of us, but people don't care about if it offends God or not because you can't see God. You just care more about offending the people around you in your family. If you do feel some type of way about this, you care more about offending them and not being present or not celebrating these events and what they're going to think about you. You care about that more than you care about if you are doing something that violates what God will want you to do or not. Again, all of these things are tied in way back in history to our faith from people that did not believe in God, and we're still holding on to them to this day. And you think our ancestors looking down, smiling upon us, knowing that they would not have been doing these things and seeing that we willingly doing it? Come on, man. But anyway, let's get back to the Bible and get some more on this. Back to Jeremiah 10, we're going to continue verse 3. For the customs of the people are vain. For one cutteth the tree out of the forest, the work of the hands of the workmen with the axe. They deck it with silver and with gold. They fasten it with nails and with hammers, that it move not. Again, obvious here what it's talking about. Talking about cutting down a Christmas tree, hanging it up, decking the halls with silver and gold, and nailing it up, so that the tree doesn't fall down. That was the best way they could do it at that time, of course. But now, right before the December 25th, there's also a celebration going on, as I mentioned to you, between the 17th all the way up to either the 19th or the 23rd of December during that same time frame of the winter solstice. That is also more telling to how they were celebrating the same thing that you're celebrating today or doing the same ritual that you were doing today. And that was Saturnalia, which I briefly mentioned a minute ago, is a ancient Roman festival and holiday in honor of the god Saturn. So first you're worshiping the god of Saturn, and then you go into worshiping Sol Invictus. Held on the 17th of December of the Julian calendar and later expanded with festivities through 19th of December. By the 1st century BC, the celebration had been extended through the 23rd of December for a total of 7 days of festivities. The holiday was celebrated with a sacrifice at the Temple of Saturn in the Roman Forum and a public banquet followed by private gift giving, continual partying, and a carnival-like atmosphere that overturned Roman social norms. So you can see it's the same elements that they were doing there that we do for Christmas, all in honor of other gods. But take a look at this part. Saturnalia is a festival of light leading to the winter solstice with the abundant presence of candles, symbolizing the quest for knowledge and truth. The renewal of light and the coming of the new year was celebrated in the later Roman Empire at the Dies Natalis Solis Invicti, the birthday of the unconquerable soul, on December 25th. So you can see this was a festival of light and they used to have candles all over the place. Of course, they didn't have Christmas lights like we have and put on all our houses and all on the tree, so they used candles. Again, it's the same principle, just transferred and updated for the 99 and the 2000s, and of course before that, but y'all know what I mean. And I'm pretty sure a lot of you guys didn't even know that for a time, like even at the time that the settlers first came over here to America, Christmas used to be illegal. Like, yeah, before people in the belief in the Bible started to come over here to America, at its inception, it was illegal to celebrate Christmas. Even one of the colonies over here, I believe in Boston, it was still illegal over there to celebrate Christmas at the start of the country because it went from worshiping guys to doing a whole lot of other, unscrupulous, crazy things. And you would get fined if you got caught celebrating Christmas. But let's finish out this message back in Jeremiah. Continuing on at verse 5. They are upright as the palm tree, again talking about the tree that we just mentioned, but speak not. They must needs be born because they cannot go. Be not afraid of them, for they cannot do evil, neither also is it in them to do good. One of the parts of the tradition with the tree, if it fell over, it would be like, bad luck or a curse or something like that. So that's why he's mentioning here that don't be afraid of them. They can't do you any evil, but they also can't do you any good. For as much as there is none like unto thee, O Lord, thou art great, and thy name is great in might. Who would not fear thee? Apparently, the people that still think they should celebrate Christmas, regardless of these facts that they're hearing about it serving other deities, they are the ones that don't fear thee. But anyway, who would not fear thee, O King of nations? For to thee in appertain, forasmuch as among all the wise men of the nations and in all their kingdoms, there is none like unto thee. But they are altogether brutish and foolish. The stock is a doctrine of vanities. So this whole thing about celebrating Christmas and everything that goes into it, he's calling those people foolish and saying that it's a doctrine of vanity, meaningless things. And again, this is all stuff in the Bible. This isn't me telling you what I think you should do. This is me reading what God said about this and showing you how this was all connected to other gods and in honor of other gods that got mixed in with the church because the people in power at that time decided to muddy the waters and have people that serve God doing things that they should not be doing. And we still hold on to it today. But let me read this last verse for you on this topic before we move on. Colossians 2 and 8 in the KJV, beware lest any man spoil you through philosophy and vain deceit, after the tradition of men, after the rudiments of the world, and not after Christ. So beware of those people that are leading you to just want to follow traditions of men and doing the things of the world just because everybody else is doing them and lead you further away from Christ. You should be wary of those people. And if your church is those people, you should be wary of them. Because how can little old me know this and they not know this and they study the Bible so much that they're up there teaching you on Sunday and taking your money? Now, I'm going to read something to you about this next topic before I even say what this next pagan thing is that is going on in the church. I'm gonna read you a few verses. Some of you guys might catch on to what I'm saying, but I'm gonna explain why I read the verses that I read and what I'm talking about after I read the verses. So we're gonna go to Revelations 1 and 14. His head and his hairs were white like wool, as white as snow, and his eyes were as a flame of fire, and his feet like unto fine brass, as if they burned in a furnace, and his voice as the sound of many waters. Now, as a lot of you guys might know, I just described Christ to you. And what it says here is that his hairs were white like wool, and then it says as white as snow. Now, there's no need to mention the color twice here if it's only talking about the color. And the fact that it mentioned wool means that it was more coarse hair. And if you look at wool on a sheep, you would see that it's not really like pure white color. It's usually more of a kind of dingy brown color. So the fact that it mentioned that and then also says white as snow also tells me that it's talking about the texture and then talking about the color. But furthermore, it says that his feet are like unto fine brass, as if they burned in the furnace. So burnt brass is pretty dark brown. Now, I bring this up to say that another one of the pagan things that we do in the church is a lot of us are looking at that picture of Christ that is not a picture of Christ. This picture of Christ is in pretty much every church. It's probably in your grandma's house. And the real way to identify that this has become a problem, and I'm going to mention more about why it's a problem, but the way that we can really tell that this has become a problem is because if somebody says the name Jesus Christ to you, the image that immediately pops up in your head is him. When you go to church and you see the image of Jesus Christ, it is that picture of a white man that does not look anything like what the Bible just described him as. But when you see his image in church, you praise him, you worship him. When you are at home and you think about, Jesus, and you are studying the Bible about Jesus, and you are probably praying and you're thinking something about Jesus, you are thinking of that image. Now, the problem comes first off because the Bible tells us what he looks like, and that image looks nothing like him. As we know, people can create something and worship it like the children of Israel did when they were in the wilderness. They made a golden calf. This was not like a already established deity. They just made it up, created it, and they worshiped it. And that was wrong. God called them out. Moses called them out. They were wrong for doing that. Now, this image of Christ is something that was man-made, put together. When you think of serving our Jesus Christ, you're thinking of this person that was actually a human being that walked the earth. So you are actually worshiping another human being that walked the earth that was not Christ. It's Caesar Borgia, one of the sons, I believe, of a pope around that time that it was painted. So this is an actual man. They took his image, posted him up as Jesus Christ. Now everybody worldwide, when they think about Jesus Christ, they're thinking about that image, worshiping him, thanking him for blessing. Like you are literally worshiping a regular human being that looks nothing like what the Bible says he looks like. The church finds it to be okay. I don't see any churches rushing to go put up images of a biblically accurate Jesus Christ. They'll probably look at you crazy for requesting that they put up an accurate depiction of Jesus Christ. Most people that you talk to, some of y'all are probably offended right now, even though I just read to you in the Bible that it said how he looks. You would get upset at me for saying that we should take down a false image of him that people are worshiping and put up a biblically accurate depiction of Christ. Why would you be mad about that? Shouldn't you want an accurate picture of your Lord and Savior up that is not a painted image of a regular dude? Either way it goes, when you look at it, if you are worshiping, praying, if when you think of somebody that is above you spiritually, that you're supposed to honor and worship and serve and follow, and you're thinking of somebody that is not him, it's no different than if you took a picture of a snow cone and said that this picture of a snow cone is Jesus Christ. And every time you're thinking, worshiping, praying, you're thinking of that image of a snow cone. You are worshiping a snow cone. You are worshiping a man that is not Jesus Christ. It is a very pagan thing to do. It is idolatrous, and it is okay and acceptable in the church. And that's a problem. And I'm just really starting to see that we're just so removed from the idea of what idolatry is that we really don't have a good example of when we're doing it, because we do so many things that are idolatry and we just have no idea that we're doing it. And when people tell us, hey, you're doing something that's idolatrous, you just get offended. A lot of it's probably you want to do what you want to do anyway. and you don't care if somebody can show you that it is idolatrous. You just know you like doing it. You just know you're going to continue doing it. So you just rather shut down and dismiss what somebody's saying when they present you facts and evidence of you doing such said thing. And nobody wants to be told that they're doing something wrong. I get that. But let's look up the definition of idolatry and let's look at some biblical examples of idolatry and how you can fall into it very easily. So let's take a look at the definition for idolatry. So it's the worship of idols. And I think most of us know that. And as we know biblically, as I mentioned, it can be a man-made idol or, some ancient deity or whatever it is, just the worship of some other idol. It could also be you worship your car more than you worship God. It could be that you worship, your wardrobe, your makeup, your PlayStation, anything that you worship or care about more than God. Also, another definition, extreme admiration, love, or reverence for something or someone. So it could be that you extremely admire somebody or something or love it that much or just have that much more reverence for something or someone more than God in the context of what we're talking about. But again, let's get some biblical examples so that we can really see. And we're going to start in Leviticus 19 in the ESV, verse 4. Do not turn to idols or make for yourselves any gods of cast metal. I am the Lord your God. So again, don't turn to idols and don't make any idols for yourselves. Now let's take a look at Exodus 22 and 20 in the ESV. Whosoever sacrifices to any god other than the Lord alone shall be devoted to destruction. So if you make a sacrifice to another god, that is a problem. All right, let's go look at Deuteronomy 13 and 1 in the ESV. If a prophet or a dreamer of dreams arises among you and gives you a sign or a wonder, and the sign or wonder that he tells you comes to pass, and if he says, let us go after other gods which you have not known, and let us serve them, you shall not listen to the words of that prophet or that dreamer of dreams, for the Lord your God is testing you to know whether you love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul. So in this example, basically there's a prophet or a person that sees visions and has dreams that prophesy things. They tell you something is going to happen and then that thing actually happens. So they've shown you that there is validity in their ability to know what's going to happen in the future. Now, most people are going to want to believe somebody like that. But it says if that same person also tells you to go off to other gods, and mind you, they're not going to say, hey, let's go serve other gods. They're not going to say that. It's going to happen in a very covert manner, especially in today's time, where they're just going to say, hey, let's go and do this. And the this is going to be something that likely does honor or serve other gods. And they're probably going to try to downplay it if you have any pushback. Most people in these days aren't going to have pushback because they think that they could do crystals and worship orishas and do all this other crazy stuff and not be violating anything against God while doing this stuff. Like, let's say the person says, hey, I got this crystal. This crystal helps you see clear dreams that help you prophesy things that are going to happen in the future if you sleep with this crystal under your pillow. Well, now you're going to start to revere and admire this crystal that's going to supposedly give you the power to do the same thing that this person just showed you. And I don't think there is a crystal out there that people say does this. This is just me giving an example, but that's how covert it can be to get you into idolatry. But it says here that if somebody is doing something like this, you should not follow them, and that it is God testing you to see if you really love him with all your heart, mind, and soul, or if you're going to go to this crystal to get what you want instead of going to him because you think the crystal is going to have more power than he does. And I know you wouldn't verbally say it out of your mouth that way, but when you feel that you need to go to a crystal to get peace or you need to go to this to get what you want versus doing what God said you're supposed to do, going to him, then you are admiring and loving and revering something else more than God. But let's continue on to see what else it says in this verse, in verse 6. If your brother, the son of your mother, or your son, or your daughter, or the wife you embrace, or your friend who is as your own soul entices you secretly, like I just said, covertly, saying, let us go and serve other gods. So again, they're not overt, like being obvious, like saying, let's go serve other gods. They're secretly kind of sly slick, taking you to go do something to worship other gods. And you see all those people that would be close to you is what it mentioned. Let's see what it says. Okay, let us go and serve other gods which neither you nor your fathers have known. Some of the gods of the peoples who are around you whether near you or far off from you. From the one end of the earth to the other, you shall not yield to him or listen to him, nor shall your eye pity him, nor shall you spare him, nor shall you conceal him. So this is saying don't pity this person, don't spare them or hide them. You're supposed to expose them for punishment, because stuff like that was not allowed, and it was even more serious back in them days. Let's take a look at another example. Numbers 25:2 in the NLT. These women invited them to attend sacrifices to their gods. So the Israelites feasted with them and worshiped the gods of Moab. In this way, Israel joined in their worship of Baal, of PR, causing the Lord's anger to blaze against his people. So they were invited to attend sacrifices to other people's gods, and they feasted with them and worshiped the gods of Moab. And it says in this way they were joined in the worship of those two gods. So now it's arguable here, but from what I can see, being invited and eating of these sacrifices and the food at this event is considered worship of their gods and turn God's anger against them. It's arguable here that you could say that they might have not only feasted, but also, maybe worshiped, like bowed down or something like that. It doesn't say that they did that too clearly, but either way it goes, what you can see here is if you are in the presence of things that honor other gods, you put yourself in the way of ending up doing something that can lead to idol worship. Because if they weren't there, they wouldn't have eaten of anything. And you can feel the pressure to eat something. Or hey, just eat this. Or hey, you can just come to this. You don't have to actually celebrate it. You can just come here. But you being in the presence of it is you celebrating whatever it is. Either way, at the end of the day, if you don't attend events that have anything attached to another god, pagan worship, idol worship, all of that stuff, then there's no possibility for you to do anything that might anger God. All right, let's take a look at another example. Exodus 34:14 in the ESV. For you shall worship no other God, for the Lord, whose name is jealous, is a jealous God. Lest you make a covenant with the inhabitants of the land, and when they whore after their gods and sacrifice to their gods, and you are invited, you eat of his sacrifice. So again, it's mentioning you being invited and then you eating of the sacrifice being a problem. Now let's also take a look at Psalms 106:28 and 29. Then they yoked themselves to the Baal of PR and ate sacrifices offered to the dead. They provoked the Lord to anger with their deeds, and a plague broke out among them. Now this is saying that they yoked themselves to Baal by making sacrifices to the dead. Now, where have you seen sacrifices to the dead before? If you've ever seen, I think some of these African spiritual beliefs and maybe some other beliefs, they might have an altar that you might create in your household, like a little area in your house. You maybe put a little plaque or, put some little things there in remembrance of a person in your family that died. And sometimes people might put their favorite drink on this altar or put their favorite food on the altar. This is a sacrifice for the dead. So again, you can see you don't have to like be cutting off a goat's head or something like that and sacrificing like that. This is a sacrifice towards the dead, but you can also make sacrifices like that towards a deity. If you didn't know, with the birthday cake, the reason why it's supposed to be circular, the birthday cake was something that was created or put in place within that birthday ritual in honor of the moon god. They used to always be round. But either way, the cake is for that deity. So you're getting this cake, cutting it and eating it, and it is attached to the moon god. I think the moon god's name is Athena or something like that. So there are different ways that you can make these sacrifices. But you can see that something as seemingly small as that yoked them to Baal and provoked the Lord to anger, and a plague broke out among them. So something that you might deem simple might be very offensive to God. Let's look at another example. Ezekiel 18:5 in the NLT. Suppose a certain man is righteous and does what is just and right. He does not feast in the mountains before Israel's idols or worship them, because as we know, Israel will go off from what God says sometime, and they would be worshiping other gods and other people's idols. But it says a man that is righteous and does what is just and right does not do anything towards another idol. And it goes on to talk about, something else that you shouldn't do right there. You can read that. But we're talking about idol worship right here. So anything connected with worshiping another idol, whether it be the incorrect picture of Jesus, the cross, making those little spiritual altars, making a cake that's for a moon god. A righteous man does what is just and is right and does not participate in any of that. But something tells me some of y'all might be thinking about what Paul did and what Paul said when he was telling people that it's okay to eat of meat that's sacrificed to other gods as long as nobody sees you doing it. That doesn't really sound righteous. Something doesn't sound right about that, especially after all what we just read about what was said about how you're not supposed to do that. And Paul said that to Corinth when he was writing to the Corinthians. But let's take a look at something that proves that what he said was not right. It was not okay for him to say that. In the New Testament, right here in Acts 15 in the NLT, we're going to go down to verse 20. And it says, instead, we should write and tell them to abstain from eating food offered to idols, from sexual immorality, from eating the meat of strangled animals, and from consuming blood. Yeah, you shouldn't consume blood, aka something like eating a raw steak with blood in it. You're not supposed to do that. Now, this is what was said to Paul before he wrote that to the Corinthians. So he was told that what he should write is to tell them to abstain from eating from food. So he went off and away from what he was instructed to do. Because this in Acts happened before that happened when he wrote that to the Corinthians. And surely if you can't listen to anything else, you could listen to what Christ said about the same thing. But I have a few complaints against you. You tolerate some among you whose teaching is like that of Balaam, who showed Balak how to trip up the people of Israel. He taught them to sin by eating food offered to idols and by committing sexual sin. So even Christ says you shouldn't eat food offered to idols. And by the way, this can also be something as simple as, let's say you go to participate in an activity with somebody that believes in Islam. I forget what the event is called, but they will take food, I think it's lamb that they have, for a particular holiday, and their prayer over that food is for this to be for Allah. So this is also an example of this food is being eaten or sacrificed in the name of Allah. More than likely, they didn't sit up there and, cut the animal's head off and do all of that stuff. They got this food, and this food is dedicated for that event and dedicated to Allah. So they don't have to be in there killing the animal in front of you and all that stuff. You think because that's not happening that it's not the same situation, but it is the same situation because that food is their offering for what they're supposed to do for Allah. So you are doing the same thing if you participate in eating that. Because even way back in the times of these verses that I read when they were eating food sacrificed to idols, the Israelites did not actually sacrifice the animal, but they were there eating an animal that was sacrificed to or for the purpose of another god. Same thing. It's a slippery slope that's easy to stay off of. And before I leave this point, let me point out just how you know that it is still wrong, whether you are agreeing with me so far or not. If you're listening to this, more than likely, you believe in God, you worship the God of the Bible. Now, if I came, walked up to you, and I had a statue of Buddha with me, put the statue down in front of you, and I tell you, hey, bow down to this statue, what would you do? Would you bow down in front of the statue? Something tells me you wouldn't do it. Now, do you believe in Buddha? No, you don't believe in Buddha. You believe in God. So even knowing that you don't believe in Buddha, you still wouldn't bow down in front of the statue because you know that there's something wrong with that. You would feel that you are worshiping another God by bowing down in front of a statue that you don't even believe in. So you don't even have to believe in these gods that these other people believe in. I showed you examples of people in Israel who believe in God, and we know that they believed in God solely. They're at these events that they're invited to, and they're eating of the sacrifice. They don't believe in the other God, and God still got mad at them and issued a consequence. So you don't have to believe in the thing for it to actually be a violation of God. All you have to do is be there and be participating in the activity, and that's enough for you to yoke yourself to whatever the God is and invoke God's anger against you. But now let's talk about a different subject. Let's talk about how the laws would make us better as a community. So first off, let's take a look at some stats to get a visual of how things are today in a negative category and in a positive category. So let's talk about prisoners. So 66% of prisoners, at least over here in the US, are Christians. That's right, over two-thirds of the prison are Christian. Now that's 51% Protestant and 15% Catholic. So people that believe in this current biblical system that we are taught in the church, this modern day church, people that believe in that fill up the prison system. They are the majority of people in the prison system. While only 1.7% of, Jewish people are actually in prison. So the people that follow God's laws, supposedly, only make up less than 2% of the prison population, while those that have been taught, oh, you don't have to follow God's laws anymore, make up the majority of the prisoners in the prison system. Well, let's take a look at something positive. What is that positive thing? Income and money earned. So let's take a look at what religious groups make more than 100K annually in their household. Well, when we look at the top group that earns that much within a year, the Jewish community is 44% of that. So they are the highest of all religious groups as far as income goes, as far as making more than 100,000. Now, Christians, they are the majority of the population. They make up 29% of those earning 100K or more. And Catholic goes down to 19%, Southern Baptist 16%, Seventh-day Adventists 15%, Jehovah's Witnesses 4%. So while Christian is the second best, probably because of the sheer number of people that are Christian, we can still see that the smaller part of the population that supposedly follow God's laws make up almost half of the people earning 100K or more in the US. That information is pretty telling. Not to mention the fact that if we were following God's laws, those crimes that were committed that put most of the Christians in the prison system, they wouldn't have committed them because they would be taking God seriously and they would actually be doing what he said do in his laws. They would not have had the ability to break the laws that got them in jail. Think about that. If we're trying to solve problems, we have to look at, okay, what was it that caused this problem? Okay, what could we have done to prevent that problem from happening? And if we can see that God's laws align with preventing problems from happening that lead people down negative paths, we can see that this is a solution to that problem. You being comfortable and avoiding the fact that these things are helpful just because it makes you uncomfortable to have to do things that the law says to do, or to have to change your life from how your life has already been. Is it more about you being comfortable, or is it more about having a community of better people around us and our children? Please think about which one is more important. Let's talk about soul ties in sex. Now, soul ties is a term that has, been brought about, it seems, to give people a reason to feel like they shouldn't be having as much sex as they do before marriage. Because we all know that the church will say you shouldn't have sex before marriage, while everybody in the church is having sex before marriage, while the pastor is probably having more sex with more different people than anybody. But anyway, they say that you're not supposed to do it, but we all culturally accept the fact that everybody is out there having sex. We all know that everybody is out there having sex before marriage. And we all know that while, some people aren't getting some, it is acceptable for you to get some in everybody's mind. Nobody is going to look down on you if you said you had sex before marriage, because it's like a normal thing to do. And we all know that. And if you can't be honest about that, you have a bigger problem. But soul ties is just saying that when you have sex with somebody, you're now creating a soul tie with that person. And that is something that you don't want to do, have soul ties out there with multiple people. And that's really a problem, because that's a more comforting term to try to tell people why they shouldn't do something. And it really doesn't work. People still do it anyway. And the whole problem with this whole thing about sex and marriage and soul ties is the fact that you aren't creating a soul tie when you have sex with somebody. That is not the truth of what is happening. And that is why it is also not effective in correcting this behavior that we want people to follow, having sex after marriage. And the bigger problem with all of this is the fact that people don't understand that sex is marriage. That is what is happening, not a soul tie. You are marrying this person when you have sex with them according to God. God made all of us. God made the system of marriage and sex. And he said that when you have sex with somebody, you are married to that person. It is not a soul tie. You are married. That is what is really going on. That is why problems are being caused out here when people are having sex with multiple people without understanding this. Now, if people understood this, again, looking at the problems that it causes when you have sex before marriage, you are not only out there possibly spreading around STDs, you are leaving children out there unattended, fatherless homes, leaving a woman out there to struggle to raise a child by herself, and then making a woman have to act more masculine and then causing problems for the next man that she's with. And then all of the negative effects of your daughter being raised without a man in the home, without a father in her home, as well as the negative effects of the son not having a father in the home. It's a whole bunch of problems that are stemmed from us thinking we could freely have sex and just move on and that's it. If you understood that sex is marriage, my brother, after you have sex with the woman, you are now married to her. So now you have the responsibility of making sure that she has a place to stay, making sure that she has food, making sure that she has clothes. Now you are responsible for all of these things for that woman according to God. Just having that understanding, first off, you have to take God seriously enough to understand that you have to do what he told you to do, and then understanding that we are still supposed to follow his laws and that this is one of them, that having sex is marriage. Now, when you have that understanding and that mindset and that thought process, now you're going to make a whole lot of more careful decisions about who you have sex with because now you're responsible financially for this woman and taking care of your household. Any women listening to this, if you know that as soon as you have sex with a man, you're married to him, you wouldn't be letting all these dudes that be out here wilding that you know ain't no good dude, you wouldn't be letting them smash because you would know that now I'm going to be locked in with this dude forever. Now I'm supposed to let this dude be my leader, my provider, my protector. You going to think carefully about who you lay with. Now all of a sudden, there aren't as many STDs going around. There aren't that many fatherless homes going on. Now there are more families building up and growing up together as God intended because now people are being careful to pick better partners. And because you know you have to be a good partner because everybody is being careful about who they're picking, now you have to step your game up in being a good man or in being a good woman that the other party is going to want that can raise a family together. Now we have to up our game because now it's not just a free-for-all, slinging meat and veg everywhere. Now we have to actually think about what we're doing and make better decisions. Again, understanding what God said eliminates all these problems that we have and we suffer with. But again, if you don't believe that that's what God said, let's see what the Bible says. Let's look at Exodus 22:16 in the ESV. If a man seduces a virgin who is not betrothed, before you say something about seducing a virgin, y'all be out here seducing non-virgins and virgins. This is nothing new. And betrothed means that she's engaged to someone else to become somebody's wife. So if a man seduces a virgin who is not betrothed and lies with her, he shall give the bride price for her and make her his wife. So as soon as you lie with her, you have to give the bride price to her father, and she is your wife at that point. If her father refuses to give her to him, he shall pay money equal to the bride price for virgins. All right, now let's look at Deuteronomy 21:13 in the ESV. And she shall take off her clothes in which she was captured. In this verse in context is talking about, if they went to war after defeating their enemy, if there were, women there that they took a liking to, they could, take that woman as a wife. So that's why it says captured here. And shall remain in your house and lament her father and her mother for a full month. After that, you may go in her and be her husband. You go in her and you are her husband, and she shall be your wife. Again, the action of going in her, that is creating the husband-wife relationship. Now what we're about to read is basically a man having an issue with his wife and then trying to claim that she isn't a virgin. So in Deuteronomy 22:13 in the ESV, if any man takes a wife and goes into her and then hates her and accuses her of misconduct and brings a bad name upon her, saying, I took this woman, and when I came near her, I did not find in her evidence of virginity. So this is a guy coming after the fact, saying that this woman was not a virgin. He did not have proof of her being a virgin. So before we get to the next part, basically her father comes showing the proof, because back in that day, they would, like have a party at the house or something like that. The bride and groom would go off into the room. They would do their thing. They would come out with, the sheet with blood on it. And then that would show, that she was a virgin. That would be the proof that they consummated the marriage and that she was a virgin. So that's all the proof. So after the guy has a complaint about her not being a virgin. Her father comes, showing the proof that she was a virgin. And it goes on to read in 22 and 19, and they shall fine him 100 shekels, the man that said she wasn't a virgin, of silver, and give them to the father of the young woman, because he has brought a bad name upon a virgin of Israel, and she shall be his wife. He may not divorce her all his days. So you cannot divorce her. Yes, there was a time in the Bible when Moses did allow people to do a divorce, but Christ goes on to clarify that when he was walking the earth, that you are still bound by this. You cannot divorce your wife. She is your wife all your days unless she commits adultery or she dies. So you guys are together forever. And this is biblical proof of that. So again, it's not a soul tie. That is not why there's a problem there. That's not why women feel so connected to you after you have sex with them. And again, this channel is for men, so I'm talking to my men. The reason why things end up going the way they go is because this is your wife. All right, now another one of the laws that would actually help things is the fact that men are required to stand on business. Now, how many times do you hear the accusation, especially of black men, of us lying, cheating, doing all these things, us not keeping our word? And you might say men in general too, but we get a lot of slack as black men in this area. There's a law that says that we're supposed to basically stand on business. So God told us to do that first. Look in Numbers 30 and 2 in the ESV. If a man vows a vow to the Lord or swears an oath to bind himself by a pledge, he shall not break his word. He shall do according to all that proceeds out of his mouth. So if you make a vow, a pledge to do something to the Lord or otherwise, then you have to do whatever it is that you said you're going to do. Now, this last point on how the laws would help us be a better community is a very important one, and this deals with taking care of people and us taking care of each other. Leviticus 19 and 9 in the NLT, when you harvest the crops of your land, do not harvest the grain along the edges of your fields, and do not pick up what the harvesters drop. It is the same with your grape crop. Do not strip every last branch of grapes from the vines, and do not pick up the grapes that fall on the ground. Leave them to the poor and the foreigners living among you. I am the Lord your God. So this is basically saying, when you are harvesting your stuff, you're supposed to leave some stuff on there to help other people that are unfortunate and don't have the money or ability to eat. And, this could be the same thing as, let's say you're walking down the street, you're putting your money in your pocket. Let's say you drop a 20 on the ground. You could just leave that 20 on the ground. Somebody that needs it might run into it. Don't worry about it. Don't sweat it. Or, of course, giving to the poor that you might see on the street. All of this can be connected with that in looking at it from a 2024 lens. Now, it also says, do not steal, do not deceive or cheat one another. So, okay, people are stealing from people all the time, especially if you live in Atlanta, no shade. But it's different places. Stealing would be something not allowed. So that means people would not be going to jail for stealing. Do not deceive or cheat one another. How many people do you know that have deceived you, that have cheated you of something? That's something that's not allowed to be done. Do not bring shame on the name of your God by using it to swear falsely. So do not swear on God's name falsely. Don't say, I swear to God, knowing you lying. Don't do any of that. Do not defraud or rob your neighbor. Do not make your hired workers wait until the next day to receive their pay. How would you feel if you were getting paid daily for when you go into work? You leave out that day, you got money in your hand. Some of y'all will probably blow it, but it would still feel good to know that you're getting paid daily for what you have done that day. Or, just basically how things are today, making sure you're getting paid on time. Do not insult the deaf or cause the blind to stumble. You must fear your God. I am the Lord. So, taking care of the deaf and the blind, not messing with them because they are deaf and blind. Do not twist justice in legal matters by favoring the poor or being partial to the rich and powerful. Always judge people fairly. So it doesn't matter how much money people got. Don't give them more favor because they have money and you feel like they can be a connection to you. And also don't treat them unfairly because they have money and maybe you're jealous or, you wish you had what they had or you just don't like rich people. And the same thing for people that are poor. Don't try to ignore what they've done wrong just because they're poor. And also don't try to judge them more harshly because you don't like poor people. Treat everybody fairly, no matter what their status economically or in the cultural society is. How much better would it feel like to know that we have that type of justice system where people that shoot and harm black people out in the street, that they're not getting off for what they did, that they're actually being dealt justice for what they did? Or what about all the black men that got accused of, raping a white woman back in the times before, the civil rights stuff happened? Imagine if we had a system that was fair and judged like that. actually following what God said to do. Do not spread slanderous gossip among your people. So, gossip, how much gossip has caused extra drama, extra problems between people? This is saying that you're not even allowed to gossip. That could fix so many problems by itself. Do not stand idly by when your neighbor's life is threatened. I am the Lord. So, if you see somebody threatened by the police or anybody else, you're supposed to go and help that person. You can't just stand idly by and just watch somebody in danger and let something happen to them. Do not nurse hatred in your heart for any of your relatives. How many of your relatives owe you money and you can't stand them? You don't want to see them on Thanksgiving or whatever because they owe you money or because you have some other problems with them. You're not allowed to nurse hatred in your heart for any of your relatives. It also says confront people directly so you will not be held guilty for their sin. So if you have a problem with somebody, go to them, handle it directly with them. You know, a lot of times you might find it's not even an issue, or you thought something was happening that didn't happen. But a lot of times things can be squashed before they elevate and escalate and get even worse. This is great advice, and this is something that you're told to do. And it says you will be held guilty for their sin if you don't go directly to them and deal with it immediately. Do not seek revenge or bear a grudge against a fellow Israelite, but love your neighbor as yourself. I am the Lord. So you already know revenge is the Lord's. You're not supposed to go seek revenge and hold grudges against your people. Again, if you have a problem, go deal with it directly, immediately. But if they did you wrong, let God handle that. The revenge is his. Don't hold a grudge. Just go on about your daily life and relieve yourself of that extra stress and anxiety anyway, knowing that the Lord will take care of it. Now, I can't see anything here that's going to tell me that there is anything bad about following God's laws. As a matter of fact, I just saw a whole bunch of ways that we can solve a whole bunch of common problems that we all have, and that it would all make the community so much better if we actually took God seriously and did these things that he told us to do. Because clearly, no version of the current day church is doing anything to counteract it. Regardless of what you might want to say they're doing at one church here or one church there, these churches have been around for more than 200 years. And the condition of the community has only been getting worse. If it's only been getting worse, that means it has not been working over time. So there is nothing that this church is going to do to save us. And it's prophesied that it's not going to save us, that God is going to have to get rid of these current pastors that are feeding his flock and sending them astray. And he's going to have to appoint new pastors. And it's going to be the new church. And when I'm saying new, I mean not doing what we are doing to this day. I mean doing what God actually said do. But the most important thing here is that we really need to know who this message is for, because a lot of you guys heard a lot of what I said and it maybe made a lot of sense to you. A lot of you guys heard what I said and it seems absolutely crazy and madness to you because you can't see the benefit in doing anything is going to change and alter your life from how it already is. So in that sense, this is for some of you and this is not for some of you, but also there is a specific group of people that God is talking to. If you go back and listen to part 1, 2, and 3, you will see when I'm reading the verses, there is a specific group of people that God is specifically talking to in a lot of these instances, like especially when he's talking about who the new covenant is for and other matters. So it is important that the group of people that God is talking to, that he is telling to do these things, like in Deuteronomy 30, when he says, who he says needs to come back and turn to his laws. That group of people has to go back and turn to the laws and start following and doing them with their children, with all of their heart, mind, and soul, in order to open up that time frame when Christ is going to come back and the kingdom is going to come to earth. So it is very important that the people who this message is for hear this message and do what is within it. And you know, I think back to when I've seen people like Kyrie post a tweet about a documentary talking about who that group of people might be. And the group of people is the Israelites. If you go back and look at what I said when I'm reading the verses, in those verses, it says the Israelites. It says Israel and Judah, or the house of Israel, or the house of Judah. That's what you keep seeing being mentioned over and over and over. So it's very important for whoever those Israelite people are. It's very important for them to find out who they are so that they can do what God has instructed them to do. But yeah, Kyrie, he ends up posting a tweet. Doesn't say if he agrees or disagrees with the documentary that he tweeted, just tweeted the documentary stating who the Israelites might be. And all of a sudden, he gets all of this backlash. He gets all of these attacks, all of these threats, and now he has to apologize and complete all of these steps to get his life back just for tweeting a documentary that's already widely available out there. But for some reason, him posting it with all of the eyes on him and influence on him. They don't want the people that he can influence to see him posting something like that. So much so that whether he says he disagrees or not, they must attack him and threaten his whole way of being, his whole life, and everything that he's worked for. They have to threaten all of that if he doesn't apologize and do everything that they want him to do. That sounds crazy to me, but that makes me think, why is it that they don't want him to post something like that so much when there was nothing negative about what he did? And then I think about Kanye. Kanye, he came out saying who he believed Israelites were, saying that, black people were Israelites, and saying the problems that he's had with the 1948ers and how they do unfair, deals with rappers that are a part of the black community, and how they push and promote the people that are telling us to do degenerate things, having our women, just twerking half naked, us men talking about killing each other, robbing each other, taking each other's girl. He mentioned how he had problems with those people pushing and promoting that from us, which only breaks down our community more and hurts it, and saying that, hey, I'm a part of the same community as you. I'm an Israelite too, basically, is what he's saying. And just saying me too and saying I don't like how you have factually done these negative things to my people, that caused an uproar, caused him to get threatened. And he didn't do anything, that he didn't really say anything negative. He talked about the bad things that he's seen happen. And he said, hey, I'm a part of your community too. And he gets so much backlash and attack for that. It really doesn't make sense why they would attack anybody that looks like him and Kyrie with all of the eyes and attention that they have, why they wouldn't want them to say things like that. So much so that they have to threaten them, pull money away, endorsements away. Why is it that important? And in 2020, Deshaun Jackson, he is an NFL wide receiver. I think he retired, but basically, he came out saying a similar thing, and he also received the same backlash, attacks, had to apologize. So people that look like them get backlash and attacked and threatened for indicating anything of who they believe the Israelites might actually be. It reminds me of Black Wall Street, a time when black people came together, segregation is in place, so we're off to ourselves doing our own thing. White communities are over doing their own thing. We are working with each other, doing business with each other, acting much like what we saw in those laws that I just read from God, doing those type of things, doing business with each other, building each other up, patronizing each other's businesses, and we were generating more wealth than we had ever generated before that time period. And now we're doing this all to ourselves. We're not throwing shade, throwing rocks at nobody else. We're not saying nothing to nobody else. We're just to ourselves doing our thing. And other people that don't like us were looking at what we're doing, and they were like, oh no, we can't let them do that. We got to go and destroy, burn down, kill, do everything that we can to make everything that they've done unsuccessful and to show them not to do something like this again. So people that don't even care for us are keeping an eye on us. And then when we're doing the right thing that's going to lead us in a great direction and create generational wealth, as soon as they see us doing stuff like that, they want to come and burn it down, bomb it, all of this stuff. It kind of looks like whenever we're doing things in the right direction, we're going to get attacked and beaten down in front of everybody, so that not only is there no desire for another person to want to try to do the same thing, the same people that were making those actions, it discourages them from wanting to continue going down that path. And it looks like this only happens when we're going down certain paths in certain directions. Because everybody out there talking about African spiritualism, everybody out there talking about the metaphysical stuff, everybody out there, they're saying all this other crazy stuff in different belief systems. We don't see any of them getting attacked for saying that. Nobody, if Kyrie, Kanye, Deshaun Jackson, any of them would have said any of that stuff, it would have been cool and okay. But as soon as we come down certain avenues, it's an attack. And when you look at the Russian icons, what Putin recently revealed when they opened up the vaults, crazy that they would do that around this time. But we see all those images of black and brown Jesus, disciples, all of that stuff that had not been seen. We see all of that stuff from these paintings in antiquity that actually show depictions that look like what we read in Revelations. And then, we can go back in the Bible and read something else in Revelations, and it mentions something about a synagogue of Satan. And it says in Revelations 3 and 8 in the NLT, I know all the things you do, and I have opened a door for you that no one can close. You have little strength, yet ye obey my word and did not deny me. So whoever he's talking to, they don't have a bunch of strength. They don't have a bunch of power in the earth at this time. And despite that, they obeyed him, Christ, and did not deny him. And he says, look, I will force those who belong to Satan's synagogue, those liars who say they are 1948ers but are not. He's going to force them to come and bow down at your feet. They will acknowledge that you are the ones I love. Now, I don't remember any time in history that this happened to the present 1948ers where any group of people came to them saying that they were lying about who they were and that they were actually the real 1948ers. I don't remember that ever happening for them. And this is red letter right here. So unless Christ is a liar, then this still has to happen. And it hasn't happened yet. And the last time I checked, the 1948ers, they have most of the higher positions in media and all these other areas. So that means that they have a lot of power. They have a lot of strength. And Christ says that these people would have little strength. And all they did was obey his word and didn't deny him. But anyway, it goes on to say, because you have obeyed my command to persevere, I will protect you from the great time of testing that will come upon the whole world to test those who belong to this world. So he's saying because you did his commandments, you persevered, he's going to protect you in the great time of testing. So when that time, and I showed you that we're already in that small 40-year window. Because you didn't deny him and you follow his command, he will protect you in that great time of testing. So this is from the word, this is from the mouth of Jesus Christ himself. And, looking at these verses that we see right here about the synagogue of Satan and them being liars and taking an identity that is not theirs, and that Christ is going to make them come and bow down at the feet of those who really are those people and admit that they were lying. That just kind of makes me think about, Martin Luther, what we read about him, and the fact that he had a big problem with the 1948ers that were around him in his time. He said a lot of negative things about them. Said they didn't deserve to look at the outside of the Bible. Said that their synagogue should be burned and all the other negative stuff that Martin Luther said. Not me, Martin Luther said that. But he had a great disdain for them. And I said that either he doesn't think that they are the people or he thinks that they are the people and he just wants to lead people astray, of course, from what they teach, because in the book, that's what Christ was and his disciples and everybody. So either those people that Martin Luther was dealing with living around his time were not those people, and that's who the people from today that call themselves 1948ers, that's where they come from, or I don't know what else could be going on. And then you could take a look at Henry Ford. Henry Ford also had a problem with this same group of people. And now Martin Luther called them liars. That's what he said. But let's take a look at this book from Henry Ford, the person that made Ford, the international 1948er, the world's foremost problem. So he calls them a problem. In 1920, Henry Ford bought the Dearborn Independent, a virile and very independent journal published in his hometown. He used it to publish his series of 81 articles between 1920 and 1922, and he published those 81 articles on the 1948 question in America, which he called the world's foremost problem. It was distributed nationwide to Ford dealer showrooms and was offered free of charge to the general public at its peak. So even Henry Ford had a problem with them. So I'm just trying to figure out, how did Henry Ford call them a problem and he had a lot of negative things to say about them? Why did Martin Luther have such a big problem with them, called them liars, said a whole lot of bad stuff about them? Then we get to Revelations and we see that there's a group of people that are lying. It just all really seems crazy to me. Now, there's also a Jewish doctor called Dr. Henry Abramson, and he has a video where he mentions how the 1948ers ended up becoming white more so around 800 AD. You can go and check out his video. So that tells me that if they started becoming that way after 800 AD, and if people like Martin Luther and Henry Ford are questioning these people and who they are and what they do, then this must be a very different group of people than the people that we read about in the Bible, especially looking at the pictures of the Russian icons and just reading the description of Jesus Christ in the Bible. But let's take a look at another source from the first century. There was actually a Jew from the first century, and he had a statement about what the Israelites looked like at that time. And we can find that in the Talmud, more specifically the Mishnah Naim. And we're going to go to 2 and 1, and let's see what he says. First off, this is talking about the plague of leprosy. and how when you see leprosy on different groups of people, how it shows up on their skin. And you can see the differences in the skin of these different groups of people, including Israelites. So it says here the bright spot in a German appears as dull white, and the dull white spot in a Ethiopian appears as bright white. So he differentiated a German from an Ethiopian, of course, fair skin versus very, very dark skin. And of course, Ethiopians are African, but everybody in Africa is an African. Now, the person's name is Rabbi Ishmael, and he says, the children of Israel, may I be atonement for them, are like boxwood, neither black nor white, but of an intermediate shade. So he's telling us right there that they are of an intermediate shade. And let's take a look at what boxwood looks like. We can see that it's like a lighter brown, a more richer brown, a darker brown. So boxwood has some varying shades, but they're all some type of shade of brown. Isn't that interesting? And this is from a rabbi in the 1st century. Now let's take a look at a little more in the Bible about this. So in Acts 13:1, we see, now there were in the church at Antioch prophets and teachers, Barnabas, Simeon, who was called Niger. Now, when we take a look at this right here, what does that say? Niger is a Latin word meaning black or dark. So this is what they were called. And again, going back to Revelations 1:15, talking about Christ, his feet were like burnished bronze refined in a furnace. So all of the clues keep saying that the group of people that were Israelites were brown people. They were called Niger. And every time a person that looks like that in these days tries to say anything in regards to the fact that we might be those people, they immediately get attacked by a group of people that looks similar to the group that Dr. Henry Abramson is saying started to pop up. So it's very clear to me who this group of Israelite people is. It should be very clear to you who this group of Israelite people is. It is black and brown people, and there are different groups from different cultures that can make that claim. But even just looking at, African Americans, we all have different shades that we can come in that are within alignment of the boxwood. But I know my people that are listening to this definitely should know that I'm talking about you because you know who this channel is for. But look, in understanding that and trying to get back to God's laws, which we must do, because even beyond the prophecies being fulfilled and Christ coming back and all of that stuff, while we are here until that happens, it will make our community that much better, that much stronger. But there are going to be stumbling blocks because most people don't want to make the changes necessary that's going to change their lives and get them out of pocket from doing what everyone else around them is doing, what their family always does. That's always going to be something hard to do. So I just want to bring up some of the stumbling blocks that might stop you and get in your way and give you some encouragement to push through those. All right, the first thing is if you don't acknowledge Christ and his message and do what he said to do, he will not remember you. He will not acknowledge you when it's time for you to be acknowledged. Or better yet, the time when you're hoping he will acknowledge you. In Luke 12:8 in the NLT, it says, I tell you the truth, everyone who acknowledges me publicly here on earth, the Son of Man, will also acknowledge in the presence of God's angels. But anyone who denies me here on earth will be denied before God's angels. And anyone who speaks against the Son of Man can be forgiven, but anyone who blasphemes the Holy Spirit will not be forgiven. And look, I know you have your job. Maybe you're concerned about, you might lose your job because of you actually going and doing what God said to do and not doing what most people are going to say and not speaking up about things being wrong in the church. A lot of people, your paycheck has you hemmed up to a place where you can't speak on things that you know are true, that you know you don't agree with, that you know you want to speak upon. You can't speak upon it because you're afraid of how you might be looked at work, or that you might lose your job for speaking up, or maybe you don't even think you have enough time to be worried about the God thing and you just out there trying to get your money up and that's your main priority, what you're focused on. And let me tell you, by all means, get your money, go get the bag, but don't get the bag at the expense of not chasing God and going after God first. Now let's continue on in Luke 15:15. Then he said, beware, guard against every kind of greed. Life is not measured by how much you own. Then he told them a story. A rich man had a fertile farm that produced fine crops. He said to himself, what should I do? I don't have room for all my crops. Then he said, I know, I'll tear down my barns and build bigger ones. Then I'll have room enough to store all my wheat and other goods. And I'll sit back and say to myself, my friend, you have enough stored away for years to come. Now take it easy, eat, drink, and be merry. But God said to him, You fool, you will die this very night. Then who will get everything you worked for? Yes, a person is a fool to store up earthly wealth but not have a rich relationship with God. So again, in this example, the person has been more so concerned about getting more, storing more, and has been ignoring his relationship with God, obviously. So again, by all means, you can get money and make money, but don't put God to the side and not acknowledge Christ and his message at the expense of going to get money. And let's take a look at this. Then turning to his disciples, Jesus said, "That is why I tell you not to worry about everyday life, whether you have enough food to eat or enough clothes to wear. For life is more than food and your body more than clothing." Verse 25, can all your worries add a single moment to your life? And if worry can't accomplish a little thing like that, what's the use of worrying over bigger things? Verse 20, these things dominate the thoughts of unbelievers all over the world, but your Father already knows your needs. Seek the kingdom of God above all else, and he will give you everything you need. So don't be afraid, little flock, for it gives your Father great happiness to give you the kingdom. So look, if you put God first, he knows what you need and he's going to take care of everything you need. It might not always be at the exact time that you think you need it, but he will always take care and provide. And look, don't try to hold on to your current life so much that you don't focus on holding on to God just as much, but really more. Let's take a look at Luke 9:23 in the NLT. Then he said to the crowd, "If any of you wants to be my follower, you must turn from your selfish ways. Take up your cross daily and follow me. If you try to hang on to your life, you will lose it. But if you give up your life for my sake, you will save it. And what do you benefit if you gain the whole world, but are yourself lost or destroyed? If anyone is ashamed of me and my message, the Son of Man will be ashamed of that person when he returns in his glory and in the glory of the Father and the holy angels." And of course, this is in the day of his second coming, which is not too far away. And I want you to see what Matthew adds in his account. He says, "And I tell you the truth, some standing here right now will not die before they see the Son of Man coming in his kingdom." Because a lot of y'all thinking that y'all not going to be here when the end comes, but it's saying here that a lot of you will be still here and you will have to deal with this when he comes. Now, this is my last point from the Bible and something that you definitely need to hear that they really don't tell you about in church at all, that Christ said. And this is in Matthew 10:34 in the NLT. "Don't imagine that I came to bring peace to the earth. I came not to bring peace, but a sword. I have come to set a man against his father, a daughter against her mother, and a daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law. Your enemies will be right in your own household. If you love your father or mother more than you love me, you are not worthy of being mine. Or if you love your son or daughter more than me, you are not worthy of being mine. If you refuse to take up your cross and follow me, you are not worthy of being mine. If you cling to your life, you will lose it. But if you give up your life for me, you will find it. Anyone who receives you receives me, and anyone who receives me receives the Father who sent me." So if you're worried about following Christ as he instructed to follow him, and don't forget, if you don't acknowledge him and his message that he is sending to you, which has always been to follow God's laws, then he will be ashamed of you when that day comes. And he's saying that you should not love your father, mother, or even your children more than you love me, and let that prevent you from following me as I instructed you to follow me. That's what he's saying. And he says that anyone that receives you receives him. So if you are doing what you need to do to follow God, anybody that receives you will receive him and the Father. He goes on to say in verse 41, "If you receive a prophet as one who speaks for God, you will be given the same reward as a prophet." So if you receive that prophet that is speaking what God said to do or what God said would happen, then you will get that prophet's reward because you received him. And if you receive righteous people because of their righteousness, and we learned that righteousness is following God's law, if you receive that person, you will be given a reward like theirs. So if you receive a person that is doing what God said, being righteous and following his laws, you receive that person, then you will also receive that person's reward as well. "And if you give even a cup of cold water to one of the least of my followers, you will surely be rewarded." So it doesn't matter what rank a person is or what status a person is. If you receive that person or do something as kind as giving them a cold cup of water, you will be rewarded for that. So if you are following God and Christ as he instructed us to follow him and following the laws, there will be people that receive you and those people will be blessed. And if you receive a person that is moving like this, following Christ as he instructed, not as the culture tells you what is okay and what's not, you receive a blessing equal to what that person will receive. So don't be scared, don't be worried about what this world is going to do or how your life might change. God already said that there are blessings for those that do what he instructed to do, and anybody that he sends to receive you on the way, they will also get a blessing. And if you receive people that are actually trying to follow God's laws and do what God said do and follow and walk in Christ's example, in following the laws, you receive that person, then you get a blessing equal to them too. God knows everything that you're going to need and everything that you might have a problem with, even the people in your own family that might turn against you. And he says that he still has you covered. Most importantly, when that time of testing comes, you don't want to be that person that heard this message and denied it for the sake of holding on to your life. He says you will lose it. Can you really afford to have that happen? All I'm saying is, I've given you the information. You know who this information is for. You know God is waiting on us, the people in the book that he has called to follow him and his laws. And ultimately, one day we all gonna be following his laws. They're not done away with. They're still here. And this church that we are following and going to and attending and giving our money and our time and our attention, our blood, our sweat, our tears, they are not doing anything to prepare us for what is coming. They're not doing anything to tell us to actually do what God said do. They are doing everything to keep us involved in paganism, pagan acts, traditions of men that all stem from people that did not follow God. And it's up to you to do something different and break the generational curse that keeps on coming on all of us. And you can look at the stats that are out there. Not following God's laws apparently have affected Black people, Hispanic people, Native Indian people more than it has affected any other group of people. That can't be a coincidence. So it's time to figure out who you are and do what God said to do. Thank you for watching this long series that I put together. And just remember, it's time to leave the church behind.